Okay, let's get right into it. Because right now, something absolutely massive is happening in our weather. We're not just talking about a storm or a cold snap. What we're seeing is a fundamental fracture, a crack in the entire atmospheric system that is literally splitting a continent in two. It's delivering brutal, record-shattering cold to one side, and at the exact same time, unleashing violent flooding storms on the other. And to really get our heads around this, we need to start where it's being felt most immediately, right here on the ground.
And yeah, for those of us here in the UK, this huge event is making itself known in a very, very direct way. I mean, you can feel it. We've got Arctic air just pouring straight down from the north, and it's got the entire country in its grip. The Met Office has been putting out warning after warning, and you know why the second you step outside. This isn't just a bit of a chilly day, is it? It's a bitter, raw cold that's causing some real problem.
I mean, just listen to the language the forecasters are using. You don't get phrases like this every day. They're calling it a savage Arctic blast. They're talking about bitterly cold conditions dominating. That word dominating tells you everything. This isn't just passing through, it's taken hold, driven by this relentless northerly wind just piling in from the sea.
And you can see the impacts of that everywhere. We're talking a proper widespread hard frost, the kind that freezes the ground solid. There are amber warnings out for snow, especially up in Scotland, where they're really bracing for proper blizzard conditions. And the temperatures, wow, they're plummeting, forecast to hit as low as -10 Celsius in some spots overnight. All of this, of course, is causing some pretty significant disruption to travel. Roads are treacherous with ice, and there are delays being reported at the airports. It's a real mess.
So it's really easy to look at all this and just sort of shrug and say, well, it's winter in Britain. It gets cold. But what if this deep freeze that we're experiencing, what if it wasn't the main event at all? What if it was just the very leading edge of something much, much bigger? Because that's the crucial point here. What's happening in the UK is really just a symptom of a far larger breakdown happening high above our heads.
And this is where we have to zoom out, way out. The sources are calling this the Great Eurasian Weather Divergence. Now, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but it actually describes what's happening perfectly. The entire weather system across the continent is being torn in two, creating these two completely opposite extremes at the exact same time.
And let's be clear, this isn't just about a few high or low pressure systems moving about. We are talking about a deep structural fracture in the very engine room of the Northern Hemisphere's weather. The whole circulation that normally keeps things, relatively stable and predictable, it's failed. And the fallout from that failure is now spilling out across thousands and thousands of miles.
So the big question is, what on earth could cause a fracture that big? Well, the answer lies way, way above us, about 30 kilometers up, actually, in the stratosphere. And the culprit is the total collapse of this vast atmospheric feature that normally acts as the gatekeeper for all of the Arctic's cold air, the stratospheric polar vortex.
Right. The best way to picture the polar vortex is to think of it like a giant spinning top. It's this huge circle of incredibly fast winds, way up there in the atmosphere, and it spins around the North Pole all winter long. Its main job, really, is to act like a cage. It contains the absolute coldest air on the planet and keeps it locked up right over the Arctic. And as long as that spinning top is spinning fast and stable, that cold air stays put.
But every now and then, that spinning top gets knocked right off its axis. An event called a sudden stratospheric warming, or an SSW, can happen. And this is just wild. The temperature way up there, 30 kilometers high, can rocket up by as much as 50 degrees Celsius in just a couple of days. This incredible heat spike is absolutely catastrophic for the vortex. It basically slams on the brakes, causing that spinning top to wobble, shatter, and sometimes even spin backwards.
And this kicks off a really clear domino effect. First, the SSW event hits. That makes the high-altitude winds slam into reverse. Then, that shatters the vortex, our spinning top, and poof, the containment is gone. The wall of wind that was holding back all of that incredibly cold, dense Arctic air just disintegrates. And that air, because it's so heavy, has nowhere else to go. It just spills south, flooding down across Europe and Asia.
But here's where it gets even more strange. That flood of cold air coming south doesn't just make everywhere cold. No. Instead, it creates this bizarre, split-personality weather system. It sets up a massive battleground across the continent, which leads to two completely opposite but equally severe weather events happening at the same time.
So on one side, in the north and the east, where that Siberian Arctic air is really digging in, you get this incredible deep freeze. This is what's behind the blizzards in Scotland, and it's what puts all that infrastructure built on permafrost at huge risk.
But then, on the other side, down in the south and across the Mediterranean, the clash between this invading cold air and the much warmer, moisture air over the sea, well, it acts like fuel. It creates these super high-energy storm systems, bringing a huge risk of flash floods and just unbelievably heavy, moisture-packed rain. Two extremes, both born from the very same event.
And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of the cold we're talking about in the north, look at this number, minus 60 degrees Celsius. That's what temperatures are forecast to hit in parts of Siberia. That is a level of cold that just pushes the absolute limits of human survival and of modern infrastructure. It's so extreme, it even has these weird side effects. The sources mentioned it's cold enough to terminate agricultural pests, calling it a natural Siberian disinfection. A tiny silver lining, I suppose, in a much bigger crisis.
And the strain this is putting on critical infrastructure is just immense. The sources point out that something like 70% of Russia's Arctic energy infrastructure is built on permafrost that's already thawing because of climate change. So hitting it with this sudden, violent freeze is a massive shock to the system. The extreme cold is pushing power grids to the brink, with reports of cascading failures near Moscow that have actually prompted a national emergency. And further south, the cold is creating these massive logistical blockades. The only land route between Russia, Georgia, and Armenia is completely closed, leaving over 1,200 trucks just paralyzed at the border, choking off the entire regional economy.
So you have to ask, is this just some random freak event, or is it part of a much bigger pattern? Well, to answer that, we have to zoom out one last time and look at what might be driving all of this increased volatility. And the evidence points in one direction, north, to the rapid changes happening in the Arctic.
The key idea here is something called Arctic amplification. It's a really well-documented thing. It basically means the Arctic is heating up much faster than the rest of the planet. And this is a problem, because the temperature difference between the cold pole and the warm equator is the engine that powers the jet stream. So if you shrink that temperature difference, you get a weaker, less stable jet stream.
And the speed of this change is just staggering. The Arctic isn't just warming a little bit faster than everywhere else. It's warming roughly 4 times faster than the global average. This incredibly rapid warming is fundamentally destabilizing the entire atmospheric system for the northern hemisphere, which makes events like the collapse of the polar vortex much more likely to happen.
And this is exactly how it all connects back to those two extremes we're seeing. A weaker jet stream doesn't flow in a straight line. It gets all wavy and meandering, like a slow-moving river. These deep dips or troughs act like open doors, allowing these huge blobs of Arctic air to plunge much further south than they ever normally would. But at the same time, a warmer atmosphere globally can hold way more moisture, which acts as the rocket fuel for those intense, rainy storms down south. So you get both fire and ice, both driven by the very same underlying warming trend. And here is the great paradox in all of this. This entire event, this savage cold snap, is happening in a year that the Met Office is projecting will have a global temperature anomaly of plus 1.46 degrees Celsius. That makes it one of the warmest years in recorded history. It's such a stark reminder that global warming doesn't just mean the end of cold weather. It means the end of stable weather. It means the rise of volatility and these wild, unpredictable extremes.
And that really leaves us with a critical question, doesn't it? Our power grids, our supply chains, our infrastructure, pretty much everything was built for a climate that, let's be honest, doesn't really exist anymore. As these opposing extremes of fire and ice become more common and more intense, are any of our systems actually designed to withstand both of them happening at the same time? That is the enormous challenge that this great Eurasian weather divergence is making crystal clear for all of us.